the reading portion, the creative storytelling portion of healing and love and shadow work, the great things that we go through on our journey here on earth. This series is called In Love with the God. There is In Love with the Goddess, but the first one that's being released is In Love with the God, the Book of Friendship. The idea that came to me when writing these books or these short stories was that we can experience the love of a God on earth when we are in alignment and willing to work on ourselves to be the thing, to be that thing that we want to attract. Most of us can't see that because we're trapped in a toxic situation or something that involves only honoring someone else's feelings, and you don't have the self-awareness for yourself. But on this journey of In Love with the God, the Book of Friendship, you're going to be introduced to Sunny and Keller, best friends since they were 10 years old. And now he is successful in his career, and so is she. And their feelings have changed. So let's listen to this story. In Love with the God, the Book of Friendship. Chapter 1. I can't believe you're going to practice today. Aren't you on injury reserve? Samantha Sunny Green asked her friend Keller Stallings as he stuffed a few things into his branded NFL gym bag. Sunny, you don't have to worry about me, Keller replied in a low urban drawl. Sunny, that was the nickname he had given me back in second grade. I think he got it mixed up with Sammy, the name my birth dad used for me. My dad never had a son, so calling me Sammy was the closest he could get to having one. Over the years, Keller never changed that nickname, and honestly, I liked it. I'm just looking out for you. When your number is called, I want you to be ready for your shot, I said. Keller and I were like brother and sister. Even though he already had an amazing sister of his own, he always looked out for me, threatening the boys I hung out with, calling me after parties, and making sure I was okay. He had 2 older brothers, but he always felt the need to look after someone, maybe because he had spent most of his life being the one looked after. We lived across the street from each other, so our families were close. I spent countless days and nights at his house, joining them for family dinners and even tagging along on vacations. His family had always treated me like one of their own. When my parents divorced, Keller's mom and sister made sure I didn't crumble under the weight of it. After the split, my mom needed time, and so did my dad, and the space to figure out their next steps. Looking back, I'm grateful they did. It only made our bonds stronger. Eventually, my mom met someone new, and he fit right in with our family. During that time of uncertainty, the Stallings made sure I still had a stable and loving environment to lean on. I'm not on IR anymore, Keller said, zipping up his bag. Coach is letting me take a few snaps at practice. Maybe today's the day my number finally gets called. Keller picked up his bag and strolled towards the door. I followed him into the foyer. I stayed over at his house from time to time, just as he sometimes crashed at mine. It all depended on what was convenient and who he was sharing a bed with. "What are you up to today?" he asked, glancing down at me while grabbing his keys from the foyer table. "I'm heading home to pack for my trip. My flight's at 6 tonight, remember?" I shot him an annoyed look. Catching the hint, Keller shook his head with a small smirk before bending down to hug me. At 6'4" to my 5'3", Keller towered over me. I either had to stand on my tippy toes to hug him or let him lift me for a full body embrace. We exchanged our usual laters, never goodbyes, and went our separate ways, each heading to our cars. That was a year ago, and so much has changed. My career as a screenplay developer took off in ways I never expected. I helped my clients sell their first motion picture, and with that success, new opportunities came flooding in. My days are now filled with script reading, production meetings, and networking events. It's fast-paced, unpredictable, and exactly what I had always dreamed of. Keller's life changed just as dramatically. He's no longer just another guy on the roster. He's now the starting quarterback of his team, the face of the franchise, the ones fans chant for on Sundays. Watching him step into that role has been surreal. I always knew he had the talent, the drive, and the heart, but seeing him actually live out his dream has been something else. We still catch up when we can, crashed at each other's houses, wake up groggy and head out for breakfast in sweats. Back then, it was easy. We were just two kids who had known each other forever. Now, life is more complicated. His schedule is packed with practices, media appearances, and high-profile events. My world is a whirlwind of scripts, deadlines, and cross-country flights. And of course, there's the ever-rotating lineup of models, or occasionally a famous singer, on Keller's arm. It's strange sometimes watching him move through that world, knowing that just a year ago, things were different. But if there's one thing that hasn't changed, it's the game tickets that still showed up in my mailbox before every home game. No text, no call, just an envelope with my name on it, like clockwork. The playoffs had started, and this time I wasn't showing up alone. My boyfriend Brenton would be coming with me. We met in LA while I was working on set with my clients. He's a producer, sharp and ambitious, someone who understands the chaotic nature of my career because he's living it too. He's thoughtful, sometimes supportive, and unlike Keller, he actually texts me back in a timely manner. Still, sometimes I wonder if Brenton is with me because of me or the perks that come with my connections to Keller. The thought creeps in every now and then. Does he enjoy spending time with me? Or is he just here for the great seats at the game? Or the chance to rub elbows with pro athletes in the locker room after? I try not to dwell on it, but the doubt lingers in the back of my mind. Keller is the hot young quarterback in the league, and his team is even hotter. They dominated their division, won their championship game, and secured a spot in the Super Bowl. The city was on fire with excitement, and the sports world couldn't get enough of him. Keller, always composed, kept it together through the intense media frenzy, post-game conferences, endless interviews, and speculations about his personal life. The internet was buzzing, dissecting his every move, including who he was dating. His name trended daily, and somehow I got pulled into the narrative. A viral story labeled me as the loyal girlfriend he dropped when he rose to fame. Old pictures of us surfaced, the kind I wish had stayed buried. The world speculated, gossiped, and built stories around our friendship, but through it all, Keller and I remained what we had always been, friends. Then came the Super Bowl. The energy was insane. Fans packed the city, the anticipation was electric, and the entire world had its eye on the game. But not everything was perfect. Brenton was furious that he didn't get a ticket, and the tension between us boiled over. We hadn't spoken the entire week leading up to the game. As I sat in my seat, soaking in the atmosphere, I had the feeling that everything around me was changing faster than I could process. Keller was about to play the biggest game of his life. Brenton was angry and distant. And me, I wasn't sure where my future was headed. I just knew that I had to focus on my career and ignore all distractions. I sat with the Stallings family at the game, and we were on pins and needles the entire time. Every play, every snap, every pass had us on the edge of our seats. Keller was electric on the field, throwing for 350 yards and rushing for another 70. He made impossible throws look effortlessly, slipping out of tackles and keeping the drive alive when it seemed all hope was lost. The commentators couldn't stop praising him, his poise, his athleticism, his leadership. It was hard to believe he had only been in the league for 2 years. He had already accomplished more than some quarterbacks in their 10th season. Yet he carried himself with the same unshakable determination he always had. But despite his heroic efforts, the game came down to a single field goal, and his team fell short. The stadium erupted in celebration for the other team, but for us, it felt like a vacuum of silence. I knew Keller too well. He would shoulder the blame, replaying every missed opportunity in his head, convincing himself he could have done more. The cameras swarmed him immediately after the game, shoving microphones in his face, dissecting his performance in real time. Before his emotions could surface, his brothers rushed into the field, shielding him from the chaos. And me, I faded into the crowd, knowing he needed space. On the way home, my phone buzzed with a text. "I need you." That was all it said, and that was all I needed to be at his house when he walked through the door. The sound of the locks clicking echoed in my mind like a giant bell, marking the arrival of the man who had left everything he had on the field. I had unplugged the television before he got home, knowing the media wouldn't be kind. The last thing he needed was to see his name being dragged through debates and criticism. As I stood up from the couch, he entered the room, and our eyes locked in a silent conversation. No words were spoken, but in that gaze I saw everything: his heartbreak, his frustration, his exhaustion. I saw the little boy who had dreamed of this moment, the one who had spent endless nights studying film of the greats. I saw the fire he had carried since we were kids, now dimmed by the weight of this loss. I could see the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides, holding back more than just words. The glassiness in his eyes betrayed him, water burning in the corners, threatening to spill over. Without thinking, I stepped onto the top of the couch so we were at eye level. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken emotions. Then, finally, he let go. His head fell into my shoulder, his arms wrapping tightly around my waist as he broke. The weight was heavy, his body trembling from the sheer force of the emotions he had been holding in. We stumbled back into the sofa, his grips on me unrelenting. As he adjusted, shifting my weight so I was comfortable, we sank into an embrace that felt like it could last forever. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We stayed like that until his phone rang, shattering the moment and pulling him back into reality. Startled by the sudden blast of music from his ringtone, we jolted upright as if we'd been caught doing something illegal. My heart raced, and I instinctively pulled away as Keller reached for his phone, his brows furrowing as he glanced at the screen. Taking the opportunity to compose myself, I headed to the bathroom to freshen up, splashing cool water on my face in hopes of clearing my head. By the time I returned to the kitchen, I could hear the low hum of his voice, but no matter how much I strained my ears, I couldn't make out what he was saying. Instead, I busied myself with making coffee, pulling out the keto-friendly ingredients Keller preferred. The conversation on the other end of the line was brief, but I caught the deep sigh he let out as he leaned back into the couch. "That was my agent," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "There are a bunch of magazines and commercials he wants me to look into." He tossed his phone to the side like the very thought of it irritated him. "You don't sound too excited," I noted, cracking eggs into a bowl. "You want breakfast?" I rummaged through the fridge for butter, already setting it up to cook. Keller stretched his arms overhead, his muscles tensing before he finally pushed himself off the couch and wandered towards the counter, stopping just across from where I stood. He watched me work for a moment before leaning forward with a small smile. "Here you are, taking care of me again, after another big loss," he murmured, his voice softer now. "I'm over here crying like a baby, and you still look at me like I'm a man." I smirked, tossing eggshells in the trash. "At least it wasn't the shoulder-shaking cry," I teased. "If it had been, I might have had to punch you in the stomach like I did in 6th grade. Keller chuckled, shaking his head. "Please don't sell that story to the media." "If I ever need a new pair of shoes, I know what to do," I joked, making him laugh again. Keller pushed off the counter and stretched again. "I'll be back," he said before disappearing down the hall. Moments later, I heard the sound of the shower running. By the time he'd returned, his usual breakfast was ready, waiting on the table. Scrambled eggs, avocado, and black coffee, just how he liked it. I turned to start a batch of pancakes, thinking about how normal this felt, despite the whirlwind of emotions from earlier in the night before. Then I felt it, his arms, strong and firm, wrapping around my waist from behind. The unexpected squeeze made me jolt. A soft gasp escaped before I could stop it. Before I could even react, I felt the warmth of his breath against my ear, slow and heavy. "Thank you, Sonny," he murmured, his voice lower than before, rougher. "Even when I don't want anyone around, I always want you." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I suddenly felt lightheaded, as if the floor beneath me had melted away. Was this really my best friend? The same Keller I had grown up with? The same Keller who once shoved me into the mud during a game of football in the front yard? It must have been the adrenaline from the game wearing off. Was he even in his right mind right now? Or worse, was I imagining things? My heart pounded in my chest, my mind scrambling for logic, but I couldn't turn around. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Instead, I let out a shaky breath and pushed him away with my backside, trying to play it off as nothing. Even as I went back to flipping pancakes, my hands trembled slightly. Something had changed. Before I could react, Keller scooped me up effortlessly and started bouncing me up and down like a rag doll. Laughter bubbled out of me as I shrieked, "Oh, put me down, Keller! Put me down!" He finally set me back on the ground, but being as feisty as ever, I wasn't about to let him get away with it. Without thinking, I kicked him lightly in the knee before smacking him with the mixing spoon still clutched in my hand. "Ouch!" he grunted, stepping back, eyes narrowing in a playful challenge. His reflexes were quicker than mine, and before I could land another hit, he grabbed my wrist, trying to pry the spoon away. We wrestled, Our movements chaotic and uncoordinated, but no matter how much I twisted and turned, he was winning. He was always stronger, always faster. Desperate, I did the first thing that came to mind. I leaned in and bit him on the neck. Not hard enough to hurt, but just enough to make him let go. "What the hell, Samantha?" Keller shouted, immediately clutching the spot where my teeth had just sunk in. His face was a mix of disbelief and amusement. I burst into laughter, doubling over as he glared at me. But just as I thought I had the upper hand, I made a fatal mistake. I turned my back on him again. In a flash, Keller spun me around and pinned my hands behind me, locking me in place. "Stop it, Keller!" I shrieked, twisting and squirming against his grip. "I'm going to show you how that felt," he warned, teasing yet serious. His head dipped down and I instinctively jerked away, trying to dodge whatever he had planned. But in my attempt to intercept his move, something unexpected happened. Our breaths mingled in the space between us, and before either of us could stop it, our lips met in a hard, unexpected collision.